You know I just had you on here so I can call you a Nazi, right? There's been a lot of talk on the right side of the aisle these past few years on perceived threats to free speech on college campuses. Perhaps the two most famous examples are the violent protests at Middlebury College against Charles Murray, well-known and controversial social psychologist, and the various Berkeley riots against certain right-wing speakers and provocateurs like Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, and Milo Yiannopoulos. And of course there have been the various deplatformings of Richard Spencer, noted white nationalist, / alt-right thinker, / white identitarian, / I don't really care, I think the guy's a clown. Right-leaning pundits have been quick to condemn this wave of deplatformings as a threat on free speech, and on that score I'm inclined to agree with them. But are conservative and right-leaning folks also willing to condemn offensive speech that comes from the left? If they truly believe in American-style free speech, where any and all content is allowed, short of an imminent call to violence, the answer has to be yes. If the answer is no, then these folks are either flagrantly inconsistent, or else they really don't believe in American-style free speech after all. Well, this past month we got a pretty clear test case. When Barbara Bush passed away on April 17th, this creative writing professor at Fresno State, Randa Jarrar, tweeted this. Barbara Bush was a generous and smart and amazing racist who, along with her husband, raised a war criminal. Out of here with your nice words. Jarrar's also taking flack for other comments she made in another context.
I don't give a I'm buying guns.
Randa's buying guns.
I'm an American. I'm buying guns. The other side is doing some stupid I'm going to do some stupid I'm tired of being the bigger person. Literally am usually, but I'm also just tired of the left being fucking stupid and being no, we have to be gentle. No, don't be fucking gentle. Okay. Resistance fighters in the 60s and 70s, they didn't kill anyone, but they scared the shit out of people. They would hijack a plane and be like, we're not going to hurt anyone on this plane, but we are going to fucking hijack this plane, why is Spencer's house still standing? I don't understand. It needs to be fucking broken into. People need to fucking throw grenades into it. I don't give a
Before analyzing this case from the perspective of American free speech jurisprudence, I thought it would be cool to invite my German friend on to discuss the differences between American free speech law and culture and German free speech law and culture. Let's see, what German word do I know that can get him to appear? I think the only word I know is Schadenfreude, so Schadenfreude.
So by the way, I heard you're supposed to bring weapons. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I usually do bring weapons. Yours are much more real than mine are.
What do you mean? Yeah, these are very real. These have won me a state championships. Actually, both weapons 1 year.
I feel like if I had this, I wouldn't want the tip on it so I could hurt people.
Yeah, well, there's again, I'm German. We like rules. So there's a rule if I ever point this at somebody without a mask on, I will immediately lose my tournament license. Yeah, these are my weapons of choice. They're more fun, I think, than guns. But I've never actually shot a gun, so that might be one thing.
Yeah, I've never used that, but I've shot a gun. Pretty fun. Okay, so
let's talk about speech, right?
Yeah, let's talk about speech. This is Kolja Keller. He's a German citizen. He's a fellow grad student at the University of Rochester. Knows a little something about sort of the culture and the laws behind free speech in Germany, and just like me, is kind of interested in speech laws in America as well. So we're not legal scholars. We haven't studied this sort of thing in any kind of detail.
This is not legal advice. He's supposed to say that to make sure nobody takes it and then thinks we're not lawyers. This is not legal advice. We are not your lawyers.
Yeah, I don't really want to get in trouble for that kind of stuff.
Right.
But we're capable of reading summaries and seeing where the courts have gone, with the direction that they've gone, and evaluating individual cases. So we're going to talk about the general laws, the general differences between Germany and America, and then we're going to zero in on the Jarrar case and see what we have to say about that, and if it falls within American free speech laws. All right, so
yeah, we're also philosophers. And I know
true.
That philosophers think they can be experts on anything.
That's true.
Just by reading about it, because we have something everything is our topic, right?
Yeah, it's true.
The world is our subject.
Exactly, the world is our subject. I like that. All right, so Germany.
Yeah,
tell us about it.
Well, it's a country.
It is a country.
It is a country. So basically, one thing, like every good German, I do have the German Constitution hanging around in my house, or the German. It's not a Constitution; it's the German Basic Law. Functions like the Constitution. And if you know anything about moral theory, it's basically Kant. It's an exposition on Kant. So I just wanted to start out by reading the very first article of this, and I'll be using the official sanctioned English translation of it. But the first article of the German Basic Law is it's called Human Dignity, Human Rights, Legally Binding Forces of Basic Rights. Article 1, Paragraph 1, human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority. Part 2, the German people therefore acknowledge inviolable and inalienable human rights as the basis of every community of peace and of justice in the world. The following basic rights shall bind the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary as directly applicable law. And so you have this first article, which, if you know Kantian ethics, it's the principle of humanity. You have that as the one sort of binding article that is governing everything else. So while we do have free speech rights, they do interestingly get restricted whenever you're threatening human dignity.
So that connects up with like hate speech issues, right? So
Right. That's exactly how it connects up with that.
So how do Holocaust jokes and Holocaust deniers, how do they fare in Germany?
It depends a little bit, because there are actually outlawed constitutions. There are outlawed political organizations, and so a political organization can be outlawed, so that you are not allowed to participate, promote, or anything like that. So, for example, the Nazi Party is outlawed, and the Communist Party is outlawed. Well, I think the two. There might be more. Well, it's actually freedom of opinion, more specifically. And this is a lovely German word, the Meinungsäußerungsfreiheit, the opinion expression freedom. So freedom of expression of opinion.
Oh, okay. So it's still related to speech. Okay, got it.
It's related to speech, but it's about the expression of...
it's got to be opinions.
Right,
yeah.
which is different from... specifically, this is different from the freedom of speech in the U.S., because it's actually only a freedom of expression of opinion, not freedom of speech.
Which includes much more than an opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is called freedom of expression, arts, and sciences. And this is Article 5 of the German Basic Law. First paragraph says, every person shall have the right freely to express and disseminate his opinions in speech, writing, and picture, and to inform himself without hindrance from generally accessible sources. Freedom of the press and freedom of reporting by means of broadcast and films shall be guaranteed. There shall be no censorship. 2. These rights shall find their limits in the provisions of general law, in provisions for the protection of young persons, and in the right to personal honor. In Article 3, arts and sciences, research, and teaching shall be free. The freedom of teaching shall not release any person from allegiance to the Constitution. And I'm not going to go into any details of specific decisions in the German law, but basically the understanding is that your freedom of speech gets restricted when it becomes a violation of personal dignity, or when you're basically violating personal dignity, when you're violating the principle of humanity, that's when freedom can be restricted. So for example, in Germany, it is an outlet, as much as the Nazi Party is outlawed because their anti-Semitic thought and National Socialistic ideas are understood as specifically opposed to human dignity, and so expressing pro-Nazi propaganda, where you're basically advancing a political view on which human dignity is denied to certain groups of people, that is constitutionally not covered under freedom of expression of opinion, because you can't express an opinion that does not align with giving every human person full human worth and dignity.
Yeah, and so the first thing I think of is it's probably hard to draw these lines, because I can imagine things that are contested as to whether or not holding that view constitutes a violation of human dignity or implies a lessening of human dignity. Right. Like, it creates an issue of interpretation and of line drawing, for sure, it seems like. Whereas there isn't that issue if you don't discriminate based on content at all, short of like certain extreme violence type cases. All right.
Right.
All right, so that's kind of a primer on the way Germans view freedom of expression of opinion, I guess it is. So let's switch gears back to the Randa Jarrar case and sort of American jurisprudence here. In my sort of preliminary investigation, from what I've looked at here, there are pretty broad speech rights for Americans in general, and also in particular for college professors and when they engage in dealing with dangerous ideas. And it looks like basically, unless you're interfering with university policy, university function, and unless you are directly inciting violence, like directly causally bringing about violence, the ordinary human citizen, the ordinary citizen, and also college professors are basically protected to speak on matters of public concern, whether it's in the classroom, because that's sort of part of their job, or as private citizens. And that's kind of what's going on here in the Jarrar case. I don't know if you have sort of any thoughts about this, what you've looked at with some of these cases.
Yeah, so I actually put down as one of my hobbies arguing on Facebook. I just find that incredibly fun to do.
Yeah,
it's part of the thing if you're in philosophy, you really like arguing. And I tend to not get people mad at me, so I actually enjoy that. Like, I can usually make it a good civilized discussion. I just usually have more patience for.
We like that
words.
Here, so yeah.
Yeah, so being consistent. So I had a a Facebook friend of mine who is a usually very staunch conservative link an article from, I think, the Daily Wire.
Yeah, it was a Daily Wire.
It was a Daily Wire article that seemed to be somewhat upset that Jarrar was not getting any kind of consequences from her university about the kind of censure. And I mean, the angle that this came from is like, well, usually whenever a conservative says something bad, they get in trouble with the university and they have to go do sensitivity training. Why didn't she have to undergo something like that? And
or maybe worse, get fired.
Right, get fired or have any kind of
discipline.
University discipline or consequences. And I kind of pushed back against it and said, wait a minute, I think what you normally want is you want universities to get out of speech business.
Right.
And you usually want the universities to not have regulate speech as much and let people express their views, especially if you're a conservative Christian that is talking about the state of California, that is considering legislation about saying things you can or can't say in regard to LGBTQ issues.
Yeah, that's a recent issue too. Yeah.
Right. If you're really concerned about the kind of things you may be able to say in that, I would think you would want the government or universities to regulate speech less, not more.
Yeah,
so there was a consistency issue,
and also like purely prudential reasons. Like there's the general principle. Look, if you're going to believe in this, believe in it for everybody. And there's the well, look, don't do this if you don't want people to do it to you. Yeah. As well.
So I kind of got a little bit back and forth and looked at some of the background things, and actually looked at the U.S. constitutional and Supreme Court decision background. And I found out that there was really not that it is really a rather strict standard by which any kind of hate speech or things of that nature could be regulated. The key decision here was, I think, a case called Brandenburg versus State of Ohio that got before the U.S. Supreme Court in 1969. And I think, do you have the particular test that's known as the Brandenburg test?
The test determined that the government may prohibit speech advocating the use of force or crime if the speech satisfies both elements of a two-part test. First part, the speech is directed to inciting and producing imminent lawless action, so it's got to be imminent, and the speech is, quote, likely to incite or produce such an action. So that basically means that you can actually publicly endorse violence. You can say, I think, the Jews should all be hit by buses. The Nazis can march in Skokie, Illinois, where there were lots of Holocaust survivors holding up Nazi symbols, which they were allowed to do by the Supreme Court. All clearly an endorsement of violence. But unless you are acting in a way that has this imminent result of inciting violence, it's got to be this imminent causal connection. It's protected speech, which is a very radical, hardcore line, but it's the line that America has moved towards since the early 1900s, and it's gotten more and more. The speech freedoms have actually broadened since then. In 1919, there was this case where someone was passing out anti-war leaflets, and that was actually viewed as not constitutional because it presented a clear and present danger. But that sort of standard, that more loose standard, was curtailed over time, and more the speeches have been broadened. And this is one of those issues where the Supreme Court justices almost unanimously agree. They'll have these 9-0 decisions on these free speech issues.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason the Jarrar thing even blew up in the national media was because of her tweets about I think the day that either Barbara Bush had her funeral, or the day she passed away.
It was April 17th.
It was on April 17th, and so she basically said some very insensitive things about a recently deceased person, which I think generally in the U.S. and in Germany is usually considered to be in bad taste.
Yeah.
And to some extent, even the German freedom of expression law has a bit of a clause that this could catch fire. Right? You remember there was the clause about you cannot provisions for the protection of young persons and in the right to personal honor.
Yeah.
So under the personal honor clause, there could be a way to say that this was in such bad taste and so dishonoring to a recently deceased person that there might be ways to legally protect some kind of university censor and such. Maybe I have to look up specific case or something.
No, that's super interesting.
But so there's this personal honor thing. But on the other hand, in the U.S., you can say something about as offensive as you want to. One of the most recent Supreme Court decisions was actually in 2017, where the Westboro Baptist Church was at a funeral of a soldier and held up something about signs basically saying that the death of the soldier was the result of the U.S. Legalizing homosexuality or something.
Yeah, it's
same-sex marriage.
Pretty standard Westboro Baptist.
Yeah, so the kind of incredibly offensive things, and they were I think suing for emotional damages. I might have looked something like that, but basically they were saying that it was so offensive and disturbing that they should be it might have been a civil case where they were looking for civil damages. And the Supreme Court, it ended up before the Supreme Court. That's one of the most recent free speech decisions. Nope, you can say something incredibly offensive that is not covered by its First Amendment rights. You can say offensive stuff all day long.
Yeah, and whether that's good or bad is a separate question. But if you're going to hold that standard for your side and for offensive speech that you may not agree with, but that comes from your side, you got to hold it for the other side. And that's sort of the theme here.
Just to make clear, I don't think that conservatives in general want to say that the death of soldiers is a result of.
Yeah, it's not that. Yeah, defending someone's freedom to say something again is not defending what they're saying. Right? That's really, really important distinction.
And I think a good example there, also from the Brandenburg case, like there's a really cool C-SPAN special on the case that you might want to link in the comments below, where you click to subscribe. In the comments below, there's a C-SPAN special, a 1-hour special on the Brandenburg case, and they interview an African-American lady who is an ACLU lawyer that specifically helped defend the KKK leader in this case, and she had a lot of people, like in the midst of the civil rights era, be really surprised that she would do that. And the reason she said she would do this is like, look, I want to really defend free speech so that I can actually protect activists to say their things, and I think we need to make sure that we don't try to curtail freedom of speech so that we keep our rights to be able to express our political views and hold rallies and make our political opinions known and heard. And that is a really important thing in a democracy, to be able to keep these opinions out there. Now, I think they made exactly the right decision when they said, and it looks like they had heard from their legal team to say, no, you can't do anything about it. First of all, because it doesn't even have anything to do with tenure. And as she tweeted about tenure, the university said it has nothing to do with tenure. It's because it was speech as a private citizen. Now, there's a really ironic thing about conservatives possibly wanting that particular university to get onto their professors for saying things, because in arguing on Facebook, I found something when I tried to look up cases where universities got in trouble for things the professors said. And the very first news article I found, do you have that one?
I'm going to put it right here so people can see what it is.
Yeah, so Fresno State, same university, just in 2017 as well, there was a professor that had to pay $17,000 in damages to students that had written anti-abortion messages in sidewalk chalk on the sidewalk on campus. He had erased it and told them they couldn't express that view there. And in that case, the university ended up getting a penalty, and so did the professor, for restricting free speech. If the most recent thing that you got lost in court, and that you had to pay a penalty for, was for restricting free speech, I think the legal team was pretty on point there and saying, whoa, hold on, don't restrict speech here. That just got us in trouble recently for somebody doing this. We do not want to be restricting speech, which I think is exactly the right call.
Okay, so they got their arm twisted a little bit, and they gave in to the damages, and this time around they were like, no, we kind of learned our lesson, and we're going to be consistent here.
Right.
Yeah, good.
Now, one thing that conservatives were upset about is that the university only looked into those 3 tweets and did not look at another video that somehow ended up making their rounds in the conservative news
which
media.
I actually played, yeah.
Right. The interesting thing is, like, we have no context. We don't know when or where this was said. But we do get something that's sort of where the inciting violence thing might become. When you get, right. I'm going to go buy a gun.
Yep.
It was good that they hijacked airplanes, but they didn't hurt anybody.
Didn't kill anybody. Yeah.
And somebody should throw a grenade in Spencer's house. Yeah. Now, I'm assuming that she meant Richard Spencer, famous alt-right,
which I brought
activist.
Up here too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, I think, maybe the last one is the closest one to directly inciting violence. I guess. Here's maybe a scenario. Suppose that they were actually in a coffee shop across the street from Richard Spencer's house, and she said it there, and the context wasn't such that she was just making a joke, but she actually really meant this and was really hoping that people would literally go across the street and throw a grenade in there. That seems like it would be inciting illegal action.
And it really depends on what she says, though, even in that context. If she was right outside, just like the Nazis were in Skokie, and she was like, I hope these people, I wish these people dead. I wish them harm. Like, I hope someone throws a grenade in their house or whatever. That's like an endorsement of violence. But the question you always have to ask is that an incitement of violence? If she's whipping the crowd up and she's like, let's go do it, and then someone does it, that's an incitement of violence. Yeah. But just like saying you would endorse an outcome, even a very violent outcome, that happened also in the Brandenburg case. Mm-hmm. That even isn't enough. So it's a really stringent test case.
Yeah. And even so, for the I'm going to go buy a gun in the video that was the basis of the Brandenburg case, they were literally KKK hooded figures walking around with guns in their hands. Mm-hmm. So that was an even more direct, like, we have arms and we're going to go do something about all the colored people. That's sort of
so you might even worry it's even closer to it. But they're just there. They're just endorsing views. Right. They're not whipping up fury. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's funny that the ACLU lawyer defending them even called their speech incredibly stupid.
Yeah,
because it was 12 people on a farm in rural Ohio, getting all.
It was stupid.
it was incredibly stupid. It's like dress up for adults with stupid views.
Yeah, pretty much like that. That's one of the reasons why free speech is so awesome. You let people hang themselves by their own noose. It's like. there were all these cases, and I think in the 70s where like there were these racialist scholars would come and try to argue that like about these like the inferiority of black people, and like they would just get their main scholars up there and they would just eviscerate them basically. And so the best response to bad speech is good speech. That's sort of the idea behind it. Yeah.
And by not even allowing the ideas to be expressed, you're not giving a chance to actually refute them. Or by refusing to debate the idea, you might be actually doing good in the sense that you're preventing this from becoming more mainstream and like shifting the middle.
Yeah.
But so you might help the middle not to even take the idea seriously, but I think it's not going to help anything with actually winning the people over that are in this. And I feel like oftentimes the only way to get somebody out of an extreme view is to engage them on their terms and take it seriously and have an authentic conversation about it.
Well, and the worry is that like by putting it in the dark, it kind of festers. But if you shine a light on it, that's a way for it to make it evaporate. Now, I do understand the concern about like moving the Overton window and stuff like that. Yeah. I get that, but ultimately, I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah.
And so I think that protecting free speech in that sense is probably a good. So actually, I do have to say, even though I am a German citizen and I'm just here as a permanent resident, I play by y'all's rules. I don't make them. I don't vote on them. I do like the American free speech rules a little bit better, but I do understand, just because I'm German and I have the most Kantian of intuitions, that I do understand that, look, if your speech does violate the principle of humanity, then maybe it's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not like I don't see the pull of like hate speech laws. There's some reasons in favor of it. It's just like I think they're outstripped. Yeah, but I'm an American, so I'm supposed to think that.
I don't think it was in good taste to say things that way.
No, it was nasty.
Like most of the things that have been upheld, I would probably think that you just, if you ask me, should I say this? I'd say, no, don't say that. But
that's the speech that needs protection, though, right? Yeah, not the speech that everyone agrees with. Well, that pretty much wraps up the discussion, so thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me while I'm having you.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I'm living with him right now. It's in the middle.
Brandish some more weapons in the spirit of American, like,
we can do it again, but I just feel like I just win this battle. More than anything, I want to press the demands of consistency here. If you truly believe in American-style free speech, you must support the freedom of others to say anything short of an imminent call to violence. The law either discriminates legal speech on the basis of content, or it doesn't. You can't have it both ways. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Just be sure to hit that little bell icon so you know when I post a new video. The takeaway for today is, it's free speech for all, or it's not free speech at all. See ya!